We're back. Episode 4. What are we doing today, Dom?
Hi, Joe. Episode 4. So we're back to do another deep dive. And this week we are going to be asking ourselves the question, are Pokemon TCG illustrators becoming the equivalent of modern day fine artists? And is the market perhaps underpricing illustrators' work currently?
You make me look like such a prick at the opening there. You know that because I'm rehearsing just starting the episode like we do, and then you always say hi, Joe, and you make me look like a dick because I didn't say hi, Dom first. You know what I mean? So
Sorry, man.
we got to work on this somehow, dude.
For anyone watching, we have done a little preamble for a couple of minutes. So we've already done the introduction, so that's my bad.
Oh, hi to you as well, mate. It's great to see you, Dom.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, we started talking about this as an initial concept, like right at the beginning when I got back into Pokemon. I think, like I kind of mentioned to you because I kind of found the artist side of Pokemon like new. I wasn't aware of that as a child at all when I was collecting, like who the artists were and the fact they did multiple cards for multiple sets. So we started to speak about this pretty early, and it is a really cool subject because they have become, well, it is way different now from base set and childhood and when it started, right? We have people being really recognized not only for their cards and their artwork, but almost famous now.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like the art that they were creating back in 1999, 2000, if it wasn't tied to Pokemon, and obviously that's difficult because they were just creating artworks of Pokemon, I'm not sure that they would quite have piqued the interest in the same way that this modern art is doing. You know, it's almost like a complete new wave of collecting because it's based on different factors. It's no longer about just the IP itself, but actually the artwork potentially separately even from the IP in terms of how clever they are, the amount of imagination these artists are using, and the amount of space that they've got to work with on the card compared to what they did when they had these little windows with no background and just shiny holographic colors.
Do you see some of the people on like online and then the people that make like the frame expansions, like they take the concept of the card and they expand upon it? It's super cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
I have no idea how people, like what their people's process are, whether, like as you said, do they focus, like do they actually bring up a sheet that big or something that big and try and draw, or whether they do draw bigger and then take a part of it? Like the process would be fascinating for some of these artists.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if some of these were a little bit more public. Do you know what I mean? If they maybe did like a create an art with me kind of thing. But I suppose that would reveal the art way before a set was released. So they've never allowed that. They have to keep these things under wraps as long as they can. I mean, leaks for new sets just come out every week, don't they?
Yeah, I know. It's right. But this is going to be a really, really fun one. Like as I said, we started talking about this early, and some of these people I'm excited to shine a light on.
Yeah, I mean, what year was that then? So it was two or 3 years ago, was it?
What's that?
When you first got back in, and I remember you asking me this question.
I would say 2 years ago now would be when that sort of happened.
2 years ago, so 2023, 2024. I was surprised that you'd only been back in the hobby a couple of months, and you're like, how are people looking at artists here? Like, are people paying attention to the illustrators, and is there a way that you could potentially invest around specific illustrators? And it was something that was occasionally in my mind, but definitely wasn't a mainstream way of thinking. So it'd be cool to break that down in a bit more detail today.
My main thought process, right, and I remember, sorry for being morbid here, guys, but my thought process getting back into it was, are any of these kicked it yet? Like, how old are some of these guys or girls? And because like we've not got that element yet, hopefully not for a long time, right? No one's wishing that, guys. But these artists are still actively producing cards. They're still actively producing hype trains by doing their artwork. It's not like a Picasso or anything where like we're never getting, like the numbers of the limited run is now the limited run, right?
Well, I'd say interestingly, we mentioned that it's not fine art, but it would be interesting if you could do a comparison against modern artists to see the rate of value increase that these artists are seeing in their work versus sort of a more traditional artist.
How do you become a Pokemon Illustrator? I know they do the
So
contest, right? I know they have the contest and all that, but not everybody comes through the contest, right? Pokemon have always wanted to work with people and pick people to work with.
I think they're in a position where they can pick and choose, right? So if they see
Yeah,
somebody doing some sort of fan art or anime art, or they just apply to work for the company direct, or they whether they have like an academy for training some of these people, I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to find out as well.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I'll add that
well,
to the old Google.
before we do get into it, because once
Yeah,
we get talking about that train is not going to stop. I did just want to say, like, not really spoke to you face to face as such since you've been at Collecticon, although we did exchange an awful lot of messages. So
yeah,
I did want to ask you, I don't know, just a little bit more detail about how you found Collecticon. Obviously, it's an absolutely
yeah.
gigantic show, and I know you kind of had big plans for your own sort of collecting goals by going there, versus buying online. So how did you get on?
One, I had an absolute amazing time. But two, I did not spend like I thought I would. You know, you see the videos where people say, "What's your budget?" and what do you end up spending, and it's always like 5 to 10x what they plan. Mine
Yeah.
was quite the opposite this time because as I said to you, I've got like probably like $1,000 of buying power here once I cash in on all of my trades or sell my cards. And I ended up spending a total of $145 on two cards, and one of them was for our challenge. So it wasn't even like we're going to sell it again in 30 days. So I had a blast, and yeah, just had just as much fun as before, but did not spend this time as much. And I think some of that goes to just like how overwhelming it is being at Collecticon. Like you run the risk when you find something you like of never seeing it again in like an hour's time or maybe less, who knows, because
Yeah.
you've still got, and then you've got the pressure of completing more still because you want to try and get around everything.
What was
So
um what was the general vibe? Was it like rammed, shoulder to shoulder? Was it as busy as it was last year or say the year before? I'd be interested to know.
definitely rammed. As busy as previous years, not quite sure, but I did go on a Sunday this year versus the Saturday, and the Saturday is always known to be busier.
Right.
So still very, very busy show. Like I just remember being able to find space at all tables versus like say a year ago, this Collecticon a year ago, you'd be like every single table you would be trying to wait your turn almost.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did notice, and again, I'm not trying to speak on their game at all. This was more of just an observation, but there was content creators there, well-known content creators, great, fantastic content creators. And maybe a year ago, there was a queue wrapped around their table to be able to speak to them and buy cards with them and do a deal. I didn't see the same level of attention or demand within that space. And that's not to speak on their content game or what they're doing. Christ, look, you and me starting here with 100 views, right?
Yeah.
But that's just more so recognizing like how the movement was so excited last year. These guys were breaking through, and a year later, they still hold a demand. People are still wanting to take pictures and do things with them, but I didn't see lines wrapped around tables for anyone anymore, which
That's
again was just
interesting.
an observation.
That is
Um,
interesting. Another question I had
yeah,
was, I know you went in there, and like this is one thing that I do every show I go to. I'll have items from my collection. I'm not necessarily just taking cash, so I will take cash or I'll have it ready. But I'm generally taking items from my collection, which I'm aiming to potentially do a deal with a vendor on, trade in, sell for cash, and then maybe buy something else. I know you had your eye on doing a couple of those deals. What was your strategy with a show that large? Because I've never been into one that big, right? And say you go to the first vendor and you say, right, I've got these cards. I kind of like a few things you've got, but also I'd like a price for cash. What's the best deal you give me? And then you look to your left, and I suppose there must be hundreds of other tables, right? And so
over 1,000
you're not
tables.
you're not a thousand tables.
Yeah.
So you're not going to approach 1,000 vendors to get the best price. Like also, maybe if you had like a $30,000 card, you might be more inclined to do that. But on
Mm-hmm.
something that's sort of lower value. So what was the strategy there? Do you end up just selling to the first guy that you get on with, or?
I mean, I reserve my highest valued cards for my maximum leverage if I find something expensive, right? So this time round, my tactics, and I will do this again now, was my low end singles that I've got more bulk of, say, than like one or two of them.
Yeah.
Instead of finding a trade or looking for a table, I went to a buy station, and there's massive buy stations, buy only. And I just sat down and said, this is the stack. It's full of vintage and it's full of modern low end singles, anywhere from like $5 to maybe like $30. And I ended up straight away giving that stack over for I think I took like 78%, something around those. It was between 75 and 80%. I wanted 80%, but they, some of them were bad condition, to be fair to them. So I actually quickly get my cash. So then when I find a table and I find something I like, I can make a deal really quickly without having to negotiate like low end trades, if you know what I mean.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Then the big end stuff I've kept for if I find something big end. So I took in $175 in low end singles, and that gave me enough buying power. And then I found that Jolteon black and white promo there pretty quick. And
Yep.
you pointed to it earlier, but if you find a card and it is something you are looking for and it is acceptable and it ticks the boxes in terms of your condition, the centering, whatever you want, then you have to pull the trigger. You really do. And the guy gave me a great price on it. That would be that next decision make. But yeah, you can go about Collecticon in a million different ways. But I will say this: you absolutely should have a plan, because if you want to buy anything or take make maximum opportunity out of the day, you can't not have a plan, because it is impossible to, as you said, move on from one table thinking that you're going to get through everyone and then be able to come back.
Yeah, I mean, my strategy is that I tend to sort of preempt any deals, and I'll have them lined up through Instagram DMs with people that I either know are going to be vending.
Much easier for you at the grail level that you're working at.
Yeah, and what that does is it allows a bit more structure to your day, because like when you get in the door, you know exactly where you're going first, and that might set up what you're going to do next. And so, but yeah, I totally agree on having a plan. Like you've absolutely got to. But I'm glad you had a good time, and I am surprised to hear you didn't buy so much. I do actually have some news off the back of what you just said. You mentioned you bought something for the challenge, so I was going to buy the Charizard V. From a lady local to me through Facebook Marketplace. She never replied, dude.
What?
Deal gone. Couldn't buy any of her stuff.
What? That's crazy.
No, fully just blanked me after saying we'd do a deal on that. I didn't go to it. So I then had to pull the trigger kind of last minute, and I'm not sure I'm that happy with it, and I think maybe they're going to go down over the next month. But I've bought I've bought Destined Rivals singles now. I bought the Typhlosion.
It's up a couple of dollars.
And I paid £24 for that.
That sounds about right.
And I bought a Nido King, but I need to check actually against the dollar total, because the Nido King was like 68, so I've spent like £93, which is definitely more than. So I might just have to go with the Nido King, which is currently on the way down, I think.
We said, and we should be tricky with our language. We said biggest profit wins.
True.
$100 to spend. So I think it's completely fine, because if you are over budget, maybe not. Like I'd pick the one card and it says profit percentage, because you know what I bought, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I bought this. It had a sticker of 110. I offered 100. They took it. I went on eBay and found it for 80. So I'm $20 down.
So I spent $92 on the Nido King, and so I'm just going to keep my $7.65 in reserve, and I'll just use the Nido King for this challenge, and we'll sell it in 30 days, and we'll see. It's got good centering.
We'll watch them all this month, and then next month we'll whack them on eBay together. We'll come up with funny listings, and we'll see
if we make bank.
Who can make the most? Hey, let's get stuck into our deep dive.
Let's do this. Yeah, let's do this. So we've caught up. Want to talk a bit about artists, and really, like, one of the underlining sort of questions to this is the identity of the artist or illustrator becoming investable long term? And I don't think there's a clear answer. I think it will be a yes or no, but we're going to explore a few ideas. And one of the first things, I guess, we need to look at right now is like, how do you think the market's perceiving cards at the moment? What is it that's driving price right now for card arts?
What's funny to me is like I think it absolutely is having an impact, the artist tied to the card, but it doesn't necessarily mean yet that every card that artist does is worth a bunch of money, which is kind of crazy, right? Like if Banksy does something, every single thing he makes is keeps getting more expensive, most likely, right?
Yeah,
He could
true.
do anything. He literally could make anything, and it would be hella expensive. Um, you could, look at artists from the past. None of their work is cheap. Yet
No.
you take someone like Shinji Kanda, who has, a very expensive card with a very big Pokemon, like in the Giratina.
Mhm.
But then you look at his Oricorio, which is arguably just as beautiful, if not more of a beautiful card, artwork wise. Again, depending on the viewer.
Yeah.
But you can pick up for $12, and I know obviously populations has a part, and then where it sits within a set has a part, but that type of discrepancy doesn't really, to me, make sense to say that artists is investable right now.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say that actually goes against the argument potentially that artists are investable, doesn't it? And it's just down to the fact that whether that Giratina art had been different based on the set it came out of and the rarity, perhaps it would still be this price. Not just because it's Shinji Kanda. So, and these aren't things that are tangible, so it is subjective. But it's just an interesting thing to discuss.
What Pokemon does well as well, wow, what Pokemon does well as well is the artists, they don't just focus on the art for the bangers, right? Like they all make artwork for base cards and normal or even trainers sometimes. Like they are made, or not made, they are a part of the deal is that they make multiple artworks, not just looking, so one person doesn't just become associated with making a Charizard and making it
Yeah,
the best in every single set they're in, you know what I mean? Not everyone, not
yeah,
an SIR.
yeah, yeah. You don't just have like one artist who's
Mm,
creating all the SIRs or SARs because, like you say, it would be crazy. But
yeah.
it must be interesting when they know that because they must get told like this is going to be a secret rare for a set, and how much more time do they put into those? It's interesting to see. But other factors that are kind of driving card price at the moment, and most of them aren't illustrator driven. Let's be honest. At this present time, it's choice of Pokemon. I'd say Pokemon popularity is like one of the highest.
100%.
The set rarity, obviously,
Hmm.
or promo rarity, and then PSA pops if they're going to be graded. Now, none of those things particularly are affected by the artists themselves, but also there definitely are some cards which are just art driven and they sort of drive a social media hype, and then people get behind them, then the demand spikes, and then therefore the supply of those available cards on the market begins to drop, and then you get a price increase. So yes, it's a
you
difficult one to get a true understanding of.
you mentioned three pillars there. I was going to say, I think the fourth one is hype train. Like it is the if something catches fire hype, and like we've seen brand new cards released catch fire. We've seen cards from the past that were not looked at before catch fire and all of a sudden become worth something. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I really think that fourth element is that modern day hype train, because once that goes and actually gets chugging along, it's really hard to stop, no matter how many people are trying to like bat it down.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you mentioned the difference in price with the rarities. Like, one of the hype trains I can think of from the last 12, 18 months is that Drowsy from Scarlet and
Oh my
Violet.
goodness, great example. Yeah.
I don't think that card was particularly that rare within the set, and it wasn't even an SIR. In fact, I was looking last week and looking at like the price comparison. There's one SIR in that set, which is the Gardevoir, which is worth anything really. I think it's for $83 raw, and I think the Drowsy is the second most expensive card, just as an illustration rare. And
Really?
I guess by design, if you bought a ton of that product sealed and you opened it, you would end up with a lot more Drowsies than you would the SIRs from within that set. And so that's an indication that actually it's not just the rarity which is driving the interest and therefore the market price.
I guess we have to think about the fifth pillar then being market pumps.
Whoa.
People who do market manipulation because that Drowsy is a perfect example of a card that absolutely was a part of market manipulation at one point as well, right? People taking advantage of these understandings of these other 3, 4 pillars and making it themselves happen.
They have. But interestingly, like, how long ago was that hype train now? We don't have the answer. Well, I
Over
don't
a
have it.
year.
It was over a year, right?
Nearly a year, maybe a year ago, roughly,
And
something like that.
so, if it truly was just a market pump,
Yeah.
why is that card the second most expensive card in that set to this day? You know what I mean? It's like these factors kind of warp together, and it might be driven by somebody sees that the art's cool and it stands out, and then they've got a big following. They create a bit of hype around it on social media. But what seems to happen within the kind of the Pokemon sphere is we all sort of agree that that's an interesting card, and therefore now the Drowsy can't be a $2, $5 illustration rare anymore because of that hype from a year ago. You know?
Yeah, it does always, even if it comes down, it always creates a new floor, right?
Another one I'd be interested to look at. What was that card? You'll know better than me because I don't really follow these modern sets as closely as you do. And I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
What was the one that they compared to the Bubble Mew that was like a blob? It was like a green, it was like a grass type.
So, yeah, Soleosis
like
or whatever that one is, Soleosis.
Soleosis, is that how you spell it?
Don't ask me. But the artist is the same as the Bubble Mew.
Okay.
So it's the same artist, and then people were saying if you zoomed in on the grass on the Bubble Mew, this is a zoom in off the grass, which is a stretch, which is a reach.
Oh, I love that, man. That's so funny.
What set was that from? That card.
That's an example that
White Flare.
That's an example. That's an example of a hype train, which in my opinion, and it's only in my opinion, just has no substance whatsoever. That's somebody just trying to.
It's a Solosis. It looks like a cell, and it is from Black Bolt. It is currently sitting at $27.60.
See, still at $27.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
I was offered $50 for this when the hype of this like a year ago first happened as well, or whenever Black Bolt came off. I pulled this like straight away. Look at it. At its peak, it reached $56.
Yeah, but interestingly, so what set is that from?
Black Bolt.
So and it's an IR, right? It's an illustration rare.
Yeah.
So the other illustration rares in Black Bolt, like, where do they sit? Because if some of those are like $9, $10 each, then it just goes to show that the hype trains don't fully die down.
It's true. And Black Bolt and White Flare are always really difficult sets to think about in terms of pricing, just because of the sheer volume of IRs and things they put in the set, right? Like every Pokemon got its own IR across these two sets.
Yeah. That was a kind of a cool gimmick for those sets, actually, because I'm not that interested in the black and white sets, but apparently they're fun to open because you just find so many different illustration rares the whole way through the set.
Man, look, I'm looking at a turtle now in Black Bolt, Tortuga. Man, it's a beautiful card. Like, it's never going to get the hype it obviously should as an artwork, right? But man, it's a beautiful card, and to be fair, its graph is pretty nice for across a year. That set is going to be interesting long term to watch in terms of the cards and the art.
And then just thinking of like another hype train. And to be fair, we've done some little artist portfolios, haven't we?
Yeah.
Where we're just going to make sure we cover important arts from a few of like the standout artists from within the hobby. So just to get an idea of like, are these artists investable long term, and what are their top cards or some of their top cards? Where are they sitting at the moment now in terms of value, and also like looking at the art subjectively and trying to decide whether that theory will have some pace in 5-10 years time. And another Shinji, I mean, he is an absolute prodigy, but the Magikarp is another prime example of, it's not the rarity of the card really, which has driven the value.
And it's not. And like, we could also go into detail with the English versus the Japanese, right? Because this card is about 50% cheaper in the Japanese version, if not even less. And again, I think you could say the same with the Seismitoad. Like, that's not a particularly popular Pokemon. Um, yeah, because I think just because it is a Shinji Kanda card, it's sitting at $172 still, which
I mean, that's wild, isn't it?
it is. And then you have something like the Oricorio, which again, I can't wrap my head around at $13, and other than population and who the Pokemon is. But when you got the Seismitoad at 172 and then an Oricorio at $13, it's really hard to wrap your head around the asked impact.
What's the rarity on the Seismitoad? It's just an illustration rare, right?
Yeah, illustration rare from Black Bolt, so heavily printed set, still available. You're going to have like, I mean, obviously, I know the statistics of pulling the specific card are extremely high, but as you mentioned earlier, really great pull rate still in terms of hitting an IR.
Mm.
So
it's interesting. It just shows how like organic this market is, and
yeah,
I think that kind of just leans on the longevity of the Pokemon trading card game in terms of being a kind of an asset and an item which is always going to carry value, because I don't think you would see these kind of nuances if it was just as basic as the rare cards are worth money and nothing else is,
yeah,
like it's a developed market where there are certain factors, and it's not always black and white. It's like very gray as to what can be worth money and the fact that millions of other people agree with you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. A couple of Collecticon connections. I found and nearly bought. I actually almost regret it not buying it. A Rory. We talked about on an episode previous. Can't remember which one. About my pick was to buy the Roaring Moon from Prismatic.
Yes.
I have it up on screen here right now. I'm looking at it. It's a Shinji Kanda card, and it's around $164 right now. It says here. I found one at Collecticon. Guaranteed 10, man. Like, it was perfect. Corners, no whitening, sorry. Minted centering, surface. I checked out a million ways I could. Perfect. He wanted 170 for it, and I ended up walking away. Wish I'd have got that because that would have been graded. Also, I am buying. I think I'm up to like just 7, so it's not anything crazy. But I buy when I see them sealed magnetons. High population, but again, just this idea that artwork one day might be worth something sealed.
And you look at like the promo market, which is one thing which has surprised me more than anything in the past 12 months, is how much the promo market has taken off across all eras of the hobby.
Yeah.
This market has surprised me in terms of like the last 2 years. It's just gone even higher than I assumed that it could. But I was ready for these low pop cards to explode. Like that was my entire collecting strategy for the last 6 years, was to prepare for that in a way, as best as I could. But the promo market really has taken me by surprise. Pokemon Center exclusive ETB promos, Japanese promos. Look at like Ancient Mew from back in the day. Like they never used to be worth anything, and I know you've got a few of those, but they're worth a ton now. Like promos are a big play.
It was probably the first things I started buying when I got back interested, because like they did such unique cards. The Charmander from Obsidian Flames is just one of the best promos ever, and again, Pokemon Center 1 is doing numbers. I don't quite understand the Pokemon Center stamp versus non, and the quite the difference that you get in the pricing. I guess it is just a population play. Obviously, I know about Pokemon Center and what the stamp means. I think it makes sense to me on the ETB because the artwork is slightly different on the ETBs compared to the regular. If it's a Pokemon Center, it does come with extra packs inside, which again just makes sense to drive the value up, and then the stamp. So, but on the promo, we're talking about the same card with just a fucking change and a stamp on it. In fact, it's interrupting the artwork more, which annoys me.
Those stamps don't add any aesthetic improvement whatsoever. If they were holographic, even, like it would be a tiny thing for them to change, but like add like a holographic thing to it. It's just like a plain text.
I don't get it.
Yeah, there's no attraction there for me, but I think the people that are buying them in bulk probably also don't care.
Yeah.
But what they are banking on, and to be honest, I think they're probably right. It's just that how long were they printed for, and
Yeah,
how many ETBs actually were there? There aren't
yeah,
that many. And in 5, 10 years time, if you want that card, they're going to be quite rare compared to
yeah.
other sort of modern day artworks which are being printed for 3 years back to back non-stop.
I agree. I agree. Let's talk about another artist. Who else should we talk about?
Well, should we pull up my portfolio? I mean, we've spoken
Yeah,
a lot about Shinji Kanda. Is there anything else to say on him? One
I,
interesting thing I one
go on.
interesting thing I did find about Shinji when I was looking into this, because I looked at it from a illustrator of the Pokemon perspective, if that's the right way to say it.
Sure.
And I do think right now, investability wise, unless you're jumping on a hype train, I don't really think that is a short term investable avenue, really. However, certain artists definitely do garner more respect and they are more popular.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you can get actual autographed cards
Sure.
from these artists in the long run, and I'm not just, I'm not going into your morbid example where I'm going to use the word where their work becomes like finite.
That's a nicer way of putting it, I guess.
Like there's no line in the sand quite yet. So there's more of it coming out.
When they die, guys, when they die.
I'm sorry, guys, artists out there. We're not wishing for it. I mean, I don't own much of your stuff, so it wouldn't help me.
I needed the clip.
But I just think, like, if you can actually get card autographs, then that really is something. Which, if you look at recent solds for, Arita, Kouki, Saitou,
Right.
who I've got here, and then like all the other big artists from back in the day, like those are seriously sought after by high-end collectors who have kind of gone through their set collecting journey and they've maybe run out of things to aim for, or like the next level of things to aim at are just so high that they can't get there, and so they're picking their favorite artist. And some of these artist autographs with sketches are incredibly rare and really sought after. But Shinji Kanda, I don't think he really has any, and I looked into it a little bit. He doesn't really do any public signings, and if he does, it's carefully moderated by the Pokemon Center or Pokemon Company International. And if he's signing stuff, they will provide items for him to autograph to provide you. You can't walk up to him like you can with Arita
Bring
with
something.
your personal card or 3
Yeah.
and ask him to sign them.
Wow.
And that's one thing where I think, like, with Arita, for example, he's the most popular artist, but I bet, and I don't have the facts for this, that he has signed 10 times more cards, at least, maybe 100 times more than any other Pokemon artist. And that will be interesting in that, yes, he's the most popular, but there's also the highest population of his autographed cards out in the wild. And it'll be interesting to see how that kind of goes further down the line.
I know I've seen it with sports athletes before because they're very much aware of like the collectibles when it comes to basketball and rookie cards and American football and the sport card space. Some people I think have a philosophy that if they sign a lot, it devalues the signature, which is what they're okay with long term. And then I have seen the other side, which is they have to reserve everything because they do a lot of charity work and they have to have the signature be worth, and they only do signature charity work. So it's people have all sorts of different concepts, but I wonder if he just is but it hasn't worked because his signature does hold value, I think. But I wonder if they just try and put so much out there that it is not valued as high.
Well, interestingly, with Arita, and we'll jump into this portfolio now, so it's a good way of doing it. So with Shinji, if you can get him, if you know him personally, you can get him to autograph a card. That's almost priceless, right?
Yeah.
He's not going to be doing public signings. And I think Pokemon are probably protecting him from the route that Arita's gone down, which has been, back in the day when he was signing cards, he was doing it to fans for the love of having his autograph.
Yeah.
I don't think these were people who were capitalizing on like, oh, you've signed my Charizard, now I can sell it on eBay for 4, 5, 6, 7 times the price. But now when he does public signings, which he still does, to be fair to him, at big events, you have to pay to get those autographs, and they're expensive, like 3 figures to get an autograph on a single card. And that's probably gonna help prop up interest in his signed art, because I can no longer just take a card up to him and get him to sign it for nothing. There's an actual physical cost to me, and then if I'm going to grade it, there's no guarantee of what grade that autograph's going to obtain.
Yeah.
So we've got his portfolio here. I think you can pull it up as well, right?
Yep. Got it.
Now, anyone watching this, if you're a fan of the Pokemon hobby, you're going to know Mitsuhiro Arita. Obviously, he did the base set Charizard artwork, which was always a golden ticket. Whether that was the first edition, the base set unlimited, or fourth print, which not many people talk about, Shadowless, and then even going into the Legendary Collection, and then all the other reprints that they did for that artwork. And when we put these portfolios together, I did it to give a snapshot of what arts has this artist done and how are some of their top cards holding up. And could I just create a portfolio of only their arts and see, if you just bought their cards raw over the years, where would you be sitting right now? And this is another angle for is it investable? And where we've just had a bit of a conversation about potentially it not being that investable for modern day cards. You look at this portfolio of 12 Arita cards, or it might be a little bit more. I think it's 14.
14.
And if you just bought those raw and kept them in a binder, you've got nearly $30,000 to your name right now.
Yeah.
So the argument maybe is, yes, he's investable.
And obviously he's done more than just these, but this example of these popular ones, the cheapest card you have here is $153. And it's the 151 Blastoise, which arguably will go above that one day and carry on going.
The reason I put that particular card in there is that one of the factors which certainly affects people buying cards is nostalgia. I know 151 was big for you.
Yeah.
And I believe that artwork is the best artwork from 151.
Yeah. The card in person is way better than on a screen. The texture does wonders to it, and it is just the way, like, I like anything with simple how to use like the negative space, and this does a really good job of that. These cards, I'll tell you what, that's Celebi, the Celebi from Skyridge. That is just beautiful.
That's another card which, if you see it in person, is absolutely stunning. And I think it's probably the most underrated of the crystal cards from the e-reader sets. I'm a big fan of those, and I collect those. And another e-reader I put in there was the Feraligatr from Expedition. Now, it's not a standout card in terms of value or particularly rarity when you look at Arita's entire collection of arts, but have you ever seen that card before in person, the Feraligatr from Expedition?
No, I have not.
So it doesn't show too well from that image, but the way that he's done it is the Feraligatr is swimming towards the sort of frame, and he's cut it in half with the water, so his body's underwater and his head's above it.
So good.
Just to look how much space he had to work with from an artistic standpoint in that card window. If you had that as a full art right now, it would literally be like $2,000.
Yeah, absolutely would. No, you're absolutely right. He has like, his style is like, I would, some of these I did not know was him. And I guess I have to call a couple out just so we can give an example. Like, I didn't know that the Pikachu, Japanese Pikachu promo, the Sword and Shield one. What would you title? What's that card nickname, Dom? Has it got a nickname?
It does, to be fair, but yeah, I don't know.
It's Pikachu walking on like a lady's shoulder. She's obviously from like Asia or somewhere.
Yeah, the kind of old school Japanese art, vintage art style.
I did not know he did Mewtwo. That one is a little bit of a shock for me. Like, that's amazing, and I had no idea he did that tag team.
The Gengar Mimikyu tag team, he actually did a lot of the tag teams. If you go for a look at Arita's, he did a lot of the tag teams. Almost all the big ones Arita did. And I wonder why he was sort of commissioned with having all of those. But, it's the biggest modern set ever. And so, Team Up, is the biggest modern set ever. It's bigger than Evolving Skies. It's bigger than 151.
Really?
Yeah, from a Sun and Moon perspective, it had the Lovebirds. It's got all the tag teams in it. When it first came out, it wasn't really idolized so much, and you could buy it. But now it's over 10,000 a box. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, the team ups are very expensive, and then he's done a bunch of these. He has kind of a mean style, or he did, I think, back in the day, have quite a mean style to his
Yeah,
art. Like the
yeah,
original Charizard is really mean. The Gyarados is like, badass.
yeah, quite
The
aggressive.
Dark Blastoise and Dragonite, even the Gengar in the team up, and then in the tag team, and then the Dark Raichu. I put that in because that was the first ever secret rare in Pokemon. They hadn't done a set secret rare until that card, and then he just, they just pull out the Dark Raichu, and nobody would have like known ahead of time. See, one
Wow.
thing that I think about being young when we were into this is we could never have analyzed it in this much detail. And like, imagine the feeling of when you saw a set list and then you opened your first Team Rocket pack, first edition, and you pulled that and it wasn't even on the list. You'd have freaked out.
Yeah, you would have. I own that card, not the first edition version, but I have that from my childhood, which is I love that fact. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So,
Let's do the other artist you have saved here, Dom.
Kouki Saitou. So I think arguably, in my opinion, as someone with, for what my opinion's worth, 9 years in the hobby, I think he's the biggest artist um, in Pokemon. And
Yeah,
oddly, like, he is incredibly well known by people who are in deep, but you ask anyone who's kind of new to the hobby or doesn't have that much interest, I
yeah.
don't even know if they'll really like know his name in depth or what cards he's done. But for someone to have done the Skyridge Charizard and the Mario and Luigi Pikas, that's just ridiculous. Like his lineup is
Yeah.
insane. He did all the ponchos. Um,
He's done the Espeon from Fusion
Fusion
Strike,
Strike.
and I didn't know. You've got obviously here that he did our Pikachu.
He did, yeah. He did the Pikachu, the
That
one that
card
we
is
both
going
love.
places. I'm telling you, that card is going
I
places.
think it will. I think it will. Yeah, it's got like the e-readerness to it, which I've just coined as a term. Um, yeah, it's a very
E-reading
cool
this.
artwork.
It's a good one. E-reading this.
E-readerness. Yeah. Um, and you look at the values. I mean, so Arita's the most popular ever, right? And which is surprising. But you look at the full set value for Kouki here with less cards. I think I put less cards in.
Yeah, like yeah,
$40,800 raw if you bought these cards. And how
11,000
many have I got
more.
in there?
12.
So two less cards than Arita's top arts, or some of Arita's top arts.
11,000 more.
I didn't just put them all in, but I did make sure to include like most of the highest ones. And if you just collected his raw artworks, you've made absolute bank.
He's
Yeah, he's heralded as one of the best artists to be given these cards to have
Of
done.
course. He's got like something about Shinji and then something about Arita. They've got very recognizable. Again, some of them you'd have to go a little bit deeper and understand, but like recognizable once you see them artwork.
Mm-hmm.
What's his name? Is it? How do you say his
Kouki,
last name? Kuki Saitou.
Saitou, yeah,
Saitou. He does
Saitou.
he's got a lot of differences here, if you know what I mean. Like you can pick some cards and see that they're similar to each other, but like to go from a Poncho to a Sky Ridge to even like the Pikachu and the Mew. I know people don't have the privilege of being able to see my screen right now, but if you type him in and you just look at his artwork, like he's got a wide variety of styles.
When we introduce the portfolios, I will put up the screenshot of their full portfolio that I've included, just so you can have a look at these artworks and you can see what he's done. But another standout for me for Kouki was the fact that he's kind of got artworks from the very beginning right through to now, to the modern day, and he's still
Yeah,
making great artworks now. And that's really interesting for me that he's got the top art from back in the day. He's got like arguably I would say the Skyrish Charizard. Well, if you look at like the values and the rarity for WotC cards, the Skyrish Charizard is standout. Maybe like first edition Charizard, okay, but for slightly different reasons. But like if
yeah,
you're just looking at like a rarity for a set card, and then mid era, um, the Mario Pikachu like stands out as another
yeah,
absolute titan of that. And then you come to like the modern era, and he's still doing secret rares of Infusion Strike and beyond, and
yeah.
I'm sure he'll do even more. Yeah, it's
Skyrim
incredible.
Charizard's arguably, I think, for me, one of the best, if not the best, Pokemon card. ever
It's
made.
very cool. I
Uh,
didn't actually used to love the artwork personally
Grows on
until
you.
I saw one in my hand.
Yeah, it grows on
And
you.
I know you saw one at Collecticon, right? Because
Yeah,
you knew I'd want to know.
a couple nowhere, and as I mentioned to you, nowhere near the numbers that I'd saw in the previous collecticons, and that could just be situational. It's a lot to hold that in inventory, right?
It
Um,
could, but it is a very rare card. It's a very
yeah,
expensive card,
yeah,
and I think people now are more accustomed to the fact that if you let these cards go,
yeah.
you might never see them again.
With this one, absolutely. It reminds me a lot of, and I don't know, maybe it's the same. Did he the the full? It's a full art Charizard from I think it's Japanese. It's an exclusive. We don't have it in English.
Okay,
Um, Let me find it and send it to you.
yeah, do it.
Anyway, it reminds me a lot of the Skyridge Charizard. I will. It could be the same artist. Who knows?
The Delta species Charizard from the X era, it's quite a rare card, and that is one which kind of leading into our next section that I was wanting to talk about, which was the future and what happens long term with
Yeah.
artists. And the reason I mentioned that card in particular is that is the only autographed card I actually own. And I did a bit of for this section. I did a bit of research into certain populations through the PSA website, but only
Mhm.
for autographed versions of cards in these portfolios.
Wow.
I'm not going to go super in depth, but I'll touch on a couple when they come up. And this card is one of them. And at the moment, the Delta Species Charizard reverse has it's like 45 autographed copies of any sort.
Wow.
So when you think about, when we talk about like low population cards,
Yeah.
I think autographed cards, if we're happy with the fact that PSA are authenticating them correctly and there's no scandals around it, they'll become an incredibly sought after kind of version of cards in the
Yeah.
future. And the reverse foil, there's 45 in total. So what they do is they grade the autograph 1 to 10 based on
Right.
what it looks like, whether it touches the edges of the card, and then they'll either authenticate the card, and then in which case you'll get an authentic and then a autograph grade, or they'll grade the card at the same time that they present you with the autograph grade. There are only 7 of those with a PSA 9 autograph. There's not any with a 10. There's not a single PSA 10 Delta Species reverse Charizard with an autograph on it in a 10, and I happen to have one of the 7 9s. So
Do you really?
yeah, it's kind of a rare card to own. I do have an image of it, so I'll throw that up.
Pricing that has
The
got to be
screenshot.
difficult.
Yeah, like almost impossible. I think I
Yeah.
put out a Reddit post like a year ago to say you don't see these too often. What do you think it's worth? And I had mixed reactions from some people saying, "Wow, that's cool," to "Why did you ruin your card with an autograph? Like someone just put pen on it and now it's wrecked and it's worthless."
Take the gamble. I think the gamble's worth it at that point, mate.
I think it looks beautiful. To be fair,
Are you good if I give a couple of other artists a quick shout out?
yeah, do it. I mean, have you
Um,
got any in
I
mind?
have an artist binder, and I do try and collect low end Shinji Kanda cards or like cheaper, or who I don't collect the grails.
Yep.
And then I collect 2 other artists. One of them, I'm going to obviously butcher the name. I'm English, but he's Tomokazu Komiya.
Yep. Come
So
here.
he does Komiya. Did I say that right? Did I do that
Yeah, you,
justice?
you, you got there.
I got there. So he has that very warped, almost psychedelic look to his cards. There's a little rowlet there.
Yeah,
Um, he's got a lot recently. He's got a lot of common cards in a lot of these new modern sets, but very very cool artwork. I do think he has some maybe IRs. I don't know about SIRs yet, but he's got a very distinctive style. It's very obvious when you see one of his, and he's been super fun to collect. The
nice. One
other
to
artist I'll
keep an
just
eye on then.
yeah, the other artist I'll just give a quick shout out to as well is Yukamori, which
Yes,
most
of
people
course.
know of Yukamori, and that's because he makes the little clay versions of cards. and then takes a picture of them in a natural setting, and obviously
I'm
they're
not a fan of
extremely.
the clay look, but I must admit
I'm
it's
not
definitely
either.
made him stand out and kind of given him a reputation.
It's one of those things like when you've been collecting for so long, you try and collect multiple things so every pack is exciting, and this is an easy one to start collecting because there's a lot of them. And they're super fun to find. I'm with you. It's not personally sort of my favorite, but the creation that goes into the clay work and then the photography, you got to admire a little bit.
Oh,
Um,
100%. Yeah.
oh, and then just one more I'll mention is Asako Aita.
Okay.
Asako Aito, sorry. And that's the
I'm
one
not
who
aware.
does the stitching, the
Ah.
cross stitching of all the Pokemons.
One thing that is good is, I mean, we see so many of these Pokemon time and time again, and they get rinsed and repeated a lot through sets, and so it is interesting to see different artists take on them because otherwise it would get very samey if absolutely
Yeah,
everything was hand drawn. You know?
yeah. I think Pokemon are clever with what they're doing, and I think they are really good about how they find new artists and are open to all sorts of interpretation to Pokemon because some of those from Shinji Kanda to the Komiya one I showed, like they are really out there when it comes to their artwork.
Yeah,
And Pokemon is very open to multiple different uh, ways of approaching it.
yeah, different formats, I
Yeah,
guess. So, talking about the future of these, and this is kind of the last point we'll make from our deep dive, but I want to just look at like our conclusion as to what's going to happen to these artists
yeah,
long term. And I noted the fact that I was trying to look at like where in history has this happened before, and it's either happened in fine art with artists like Van Gogh, who died pretty poor, to be honest, and nobody recognized his art, and he died thinking he was a failure, which is interesting when you look now at like the fact that he's such a
yep,
gigantic feature within the art world, and his art's worth so much money. And then thinking like closer to modern times was Stan Lee with comics.
yeah,
He
yeah,
did things like Spider-Man and the Fantastic
yeah.
Four,
Great point.
X-Men, and he passed away. And looking back through sort of the history, because I didn't collect comics, there was a spike in buying products which he'd drawn or particularly items he'd autographed. Funnily enough, when they became finite, as sad as that is, now it creates its own kind of hype cycle. But also, I guess people realize where they thought they had forever to potentially collect items on their behalf, they've not been able to do that anymore, and that kind of drives a spike. Um, Interestingly, though, he was renowned for signing everything, and for a very, very long period of time. He lived to be quite old, so he was signing stuff for like 30, 40 years
Yeah,
non-stop. And therefore, that means that actually there was quite a large population of these items out there.
yeah,
So then, if you were looking at value spikes within stuff he'd signed, it wasn't just, oh, does it have Stanley's signature on it? It was, which item is it with his signature on it? Similar to how like we look at, say, if you're going to get a Kouki Saitou signature and it happens to be on a Mario Pikachu, like it's worth crazy money. The Mario Pikachu is worth crazy money now. It signed is worth crazy money now. Imagine in 20, 30
yeah,
years, like if
yeah,
Pokemon's still going as strong as it is, it's going to be like an artifact, quite
yeah,
honestly.
yeah,
Same with Arita, with like, you can get him to sign like common cards he's done, or even like a Dark
yeah.
Raichu, not first edition. Yeah, it'll be worth some money. But if you've got a first edition Shadowless Charizard with a sketch and a perfect autograph done by him, authenticated by PSA, I mean, I can't even imagine what these things are going to be worth in another 10, 20 years if this carries on.
I think that's going to be a core theme of this is that art is appreciated by in generational chunks, right? And some of this stuff is going to take a while because we've got people still living, still signing, still creating. But when the inevitable does take its course and these things do become more finite and no longer does the artist exist, then I think you're right. Things like cards that have a unique artwork signed by the artist that are then potentially graded are going to be grails.
Yeah. You don't think, because these things are widely printed. So with like somebody who's a fine artist, they might do one copy of a painting.
Yeah,
and then that painting will go on to be worth millions if they become a recognized, persona within the fine art world. Most of the time, these artists are they're commercial, right? They're creating these
Mhm.
large print lines of artwork, especially for more modern sets. And do you think that just eventually will wash it out, and they may retain a reputation as an artist, but that doesn't mean that the individual artworks are actually going to hold up any more value than they would have done anyway?
No, I only think they're going up. Yeah.
To the moon.
Yeah, to the moon. Yeah, no, again, we should have done a bit more background check on some of these guys and seen where they're at in life. But the first one will be a big test pilot. But yeah, no, I think just to the moon.
I know you can follow Kouki on Instagram, and
And yeah,
he because I do follow him, and he quite often you should do that.
yeah, I will.
So I can tell that he's kind of dismayed with the Pokemon boom in a way,
Yeah,
just in like the way he behaves. So he doesn't really do Pokemon arts anymore, but he'll do like custom prints of other animes and
yeah,
ideas he's got, just like from an artwork standpoint. And then he puts them on his Instagram, and if you comment, you can actually win his art, or you can win a chance to buy that piece of art. But he no longer does public signings. He's literally like
really,
he jacked it. He's jacked it in, yeah. So that's another thing. It's like it's not even if these people pass away. If Arita suddenly says, "I'm done. I'm never going to sign another Pokemon card again," and he
yep.
says that publicly, like Kouki has, um, then it's going to have the same effect, in
Same
my opinion.
effect, right? Same effect. So everyone should be getting all their cards autographed. Any card, get them autographed. They're going to the moon.
I would say, and I don't know how many you saw. Did you see
Yeah.
many at Collecticon when you're looking in cases? Like, do people
Some
hold these?
person, I found one person that had like a whole case of autograph cards because they purposely tried to collect them and that's what they flip, but it's very niche. After that, no. Most people are now going towards singles and raw singles, and so that's where it's got to
I
go.
think there's a general like consensus
Yeah.
when you look at like people's opinions that they're not really a massive fan of autographed cards,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that there's potentially a problem with authenticating them, and that you're ruining the
Yeah.
original piece of art or the original card.
Yeah.
So yeah, be interesting to see how this goes, but it's something I'm
It
going to
is.
keep an eye on, and I would love to buy some more autographed cards going forward.
Yeah, I'm going to keep my binder going with my artists. You never know where this ends up going. And yeah, some of these I might start paying more attention to the autograph section at Collecticon.
Nice. So next week we're going back to our normal format, right?
Yeah, I think we'll start with a recap next week. Get get the news in, see what's been hot. Things change in Pokemon all the time, right? So we'll go back to our sort of regular piece before we plan our next deep dive, which I know we've got some really good bangers coming on the pipeline.
Sounds good. Well,
Right,
let's leave it there, and leave a comment. Please subscribe or
that's
like if you
right.
have got this far. We have actually got a bunch of views on a couple of our last
Yes, we
videos. At nearly
have.
1,000 for episode 3, and late hundreds for episode 2. So yeah, thanks for watching if you've taken the time, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, if there's a deep dive anyone wants to know, send them our way.